You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Time now to debate some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have State Representatives Carol Spackman-Moss and Corey Malloy. Glad to have both of you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Let's get right into one of the national narratives we're really seeing starting to develop. I talked about the panel with this to the panel a couple weeks ago, but I want to dig into it a little more. Law and order versus the coronavirus response. Which one is more important to Utah voters as we head toward November? Representative Malloy, let's start with you.
Well, I think they're both very, very important. Law and order is very important for our society. We're a society based on laws and obeying those laws, and we have a pandemic. And there's a lot of things going on in this world related to both. And I think one of the things that we really need to focus on the most is the pandemic and making sure we get through that and help as many people as possible, while at the same time looking at how we get back to normal as quickly as possible. And what we've been seeing as far as law and order, some of the rioting and some of the violence, really that is a distraction from what I think we really should be focusing on, which is protecting our society.
Okay, but that has become President Trump's #1 message out on the campaign trail. So we'll get to that in just a second. But Representative Spackman-Moss, your thoughts. Which is more important to a voter, law and order or coronavirus response?
I think it's the coronavirus response because people are losing their lives. 1,000 people a day are still dying in the United States. And here in Utah, we've had an uptick in cases in Utah County and other places with schools starting. I mean, this is life and death. Now, the protests are, for the most part, 93% are peaceful, but the ones that have caused damage and even death are the ones that are getting attention, and it's a distraction. And the Republicans, in specifically President Trump, is using that as his campaign speech. And I think it's simply a distraction because I believe in law and order. We all do. But it's happening, those protests, primarily in large cities, not all across America in the suburbs and small towns and rural areas.
All right, Representative Moy, let's bring you back in here because we have been hearing the president talk a lot about law and order. Is that a winning message? I believe you just said it was a distraction as well to the coronavirus response. Is that a winning message coming down the stretch?
Well, I think law and order is very, very important. We are a society that is based on laws and order, and we need to have that to make the rest of our society work. So it's not if one's better or more important than the other, they're all important. But I think we need to make sure that we have our laws enforced and that people feel safe on their streets and where they live. And it is happening all across the country. It's happened right here in Utah. We've had some really unfortunate incidences where rioting and vandalism and violence has occurred here in our state. It's been worse in others, of course, but those are things that we need to fight against, and so that we can stay focused on the things that are important in our daily lives.
Representative Spackman-Moss, President Trump is trying to tie that to Democratic-led cities. Are Democrats weak on law and order, and is he getting to the American people with that message?
No, they're not weak. They just are the states and cities that happen to have Democratic governors. It's not as a result of that. I believe in peaceful protest. It's a constitutional right that we have. I think maybe they should have stepped in a bit sooner in some cases, but I'm supportive for the most part of police. They're bad cops. They're bad teachers, they're bad people in every profession. They should, those are the people they should focus on. But no, again, it's a political ploy to try and use it against the Democrats.
Representative Malloy, are Democrats weak on law and order?
Yes, I would say they are, simply because a lot of these Democratic cities and states, the executive leaders are getting involved in the protesting, which is their right. But what they're really doing is pulling back the ability of peace officers to enforce the law. And we understand we're in a very sensitive time period, but we can't just sit here and tie the hands behind the backs of our peace officers. They need to be able to get in and do their jobs and do it right and do it professionally. And certainly we want them to do it well and do it right. And try not to make any mistakes that would put anybody in harm's way. But the protests quite often lead into riots, and then we have a very bad law and order situation that we need to get back into control, and our peace officers are being told to back off, stand down, not be able to investigate properly, and oftentimes that's, de-escalation is the right way to go, but at the same time we need them to help enforce our laws.
I do want to move on, but real quick, Representative Spackman-Moss, this issue on our police officers, are they being fully supported the way they should be across the country?
No, I'm afraid that a lot of the protests, some of the protesters have done things and said things that have made cops completely demoralized. I've talked to some of our local police officers, and certainly the cities I represent, the police are very much supported and respected and admired by the community. So I know it'd be very hard to be a police officer now, because a lot of them feel like the public looks at them and thinks, oh, you're one of those who use unnecessary violence, and I don't think it's right.
Okay, I want to get to Tuesday's historic signing of peace agreements between 3 Middle Eastern countries, that being Jerusalem, United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. Representative Malloy, is that a win for President Trump as he moves closer to Election Day?
I think it's a huge win. I think we haven't seen anything like this for many, many decades, where a sitting U.S. president has been able to bring two opposing sides or multiple opposing sides together to the peace table to bring peace to that area of the world. I think it's a great thing. I think it speaks very well of our president among many of the other things that he's done. And I think he's shown that he has a very strong foreign relations policy. He's been able to bring a lot of different people together that people would never think would be able to get put together with the United States. So I think it's a big win for the president.
Representative Spackman-Moss, Speaker Pelosi talked about that ceremony, the signing ceremony, the public ceremony, and called it a distraction from the coronavirus response. Do you believe this was an overall win for the president?
Well, he certainly considers it a win, and his supporters do, but it is in fact overrated. Those are not countries that are at odds in the same way that the Palestinians and the Israelis are. That would have been a true peace accord. The UAE and Bahrain, they have not been that far apart. And frankly, Netanyahu needed a win because he's in a precarious situation politically, and President Trump needs a win. So it was advantageous to the two of them. Who was sitting up on the front row at that signing? Of course, Netanyahu. So I'm a little suspect that it was overrated and done as political expediency. I'm happy they're coming together, but the real test is far from settled, and that's Palestine and Israel.
Yeah, we will see how that plays out. Iran in the question there as well. Apparently
yes,
there are
Iran
more
too.
countries that could be coming on unsigned, so we'll see how that plays out. Real quick, 6 months of the coronavirus now. We are still in a state of emergency. To the two of you, my question is that excessive or necessary to still be in a state of emergency 6 months in? Representative Malloy, let's start with you.
I think in the case of the coronavirus, it's very excessive. I think we've reached a point where we know how to manage the situation with our people. We know how the virus acts. We know what to look for for potential spikes. We know what to do, and we don't need to be in a continued state of emergency for this particular situation. We're actually under 3 states of emergency right now. One with the winds, the fires, and the coronavirus. But this one is way too long.
Okay, we're going to have to stop there because we've got 30 seconds left, and I want to give Representative Spackman-Moss the final word.
It's really important that we keep this state of emergency for several reasons. One, federal funds. We're able to get federal funds, FEMA funds. It's even paying for the National Guard to come out and help with fires and small business loans. I could name others, but these federal funds are accessible only if we're in a state of emergency.
Okay.
And that alone is beneficial for all Utahns.
All right, we're going to have to end on that note. Great conversation. Thanks to the two of you for being here.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks.
Stay
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break.